pull up a seat to the EduTable
with Nicole Biscotti and Melissa Sidebotham.
Welcome. We're so glad that you've decided to pull up a seat to the EduTable. The conversation is even more rich the more people participate. Make sure you invite your friends to listen at the EduTable and continue the conversation on our forum at theedutable.com or on Twitter at _edu_table. We hope you are enjoying the podcast as much as we enjoy putting it together. If you do, please be sure to leave us a review. It helps the podcast be seen and brings even more people to the table. My name is Melissa Sidebotham, and I am here with my good friend, Nicole Biscotti.
Hi, I'm Nicole Biscotti. The EduTable is a place for parents and educators to share ideas and perspectives. Today is Juneteenth, and we are honored to have a panel of people that are dynamic and insightful and have a lot of wisdom to share on important topics, the important conversations that are happening right now. I apologize in advance for my voice and for being a little quiet on this podcast. Unfortunately, I've been pretty sick lately, but we didn't want Juneteenth to pass without us having this conversation. So thank you all for being here listening.
Thank you so much, Nicole. I really appreciate you, really doing everything you can to help us make this conversation happen today. So without further ado, I would love to have our panel introduce themselves. I think you will agree we have a wonderful group put together today, and they're sure to be sharing so much insight and their experiences, and we're really lucky to have them here with us. So Basil, will you go ahead and let everybody know how or who you are?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Nicole and Melissa, for having me on the show here today. I currently am a high school assistant principal in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm also a national speaker, but I'm also a disruptor of the status quo.
Fantastic. And we're so happy that you were able to join us today. Next up, we've got Amber. Amber, will you introduce yourself? And you've heard Amber once or twice on our show before. She's a regular. Go ahead, Amber.
Awesome. Hi, my name is Amber Coleman Mortley. I'm the Director of Social Engagement at iCivics. We make video games and civic content. I'm also a mom blogger, and I run a podcast with my 3 daughters. It's called Let's K-12 Better.
And if you haven't had a chance to listen to that podcast, I highly recommend it. It is fantastic. Amber and her daughters are always putting out wonderful conversations. So next up, we have Evan. Evan, can you let everybody know who you are? And again, you'll also recognize his voice because he's been on our show once or twice as well.
Hi, thanks for the introduction, Melissa and Nicole. Thanks for having me on again. My name is Evan Whitehead. I'm Director of Special Services in Lindop School District 92, right outside the city of Chicago in Illinois. And I oversee all federal programs, special education, McKinney Mental Homeless, social emotional learning, and family community engagement. And I'm also a national consultant, speaker, and presenter, and a mental health advocate.
Thank you so much, Evan. And he has been such a driving force with Nicole and I on this podcast. His support has just been, I can't even say how much it's really helped us. So thank you so much for being with us again, Evan.
Thank you.
And last but not least, we have Enya.
Hi, thank you for having me. This is my first time on the podcast, but I'm so honored to be here with you all. I'm Dr. Enya Williams. I'm a 2020 graduate from DePaul University, so I am in the celebratory mode right now. But I have been an educator for 14 years. Currently an administrator in the Northwest suburbs. So I am so excited to be here with you all to bring my experiences, to bring just perspectives to the EduTable. Thanks for having me.
We are really, really excited to have you on the podcast, and thank you for sharing your time and your wisdom with us. Before we had started recording, we were having some conversations, just kind of in our little green room, and we were recognizing the fact that today is a really important day in Juneteenth, and I posed the question about how everybody was celebrating. And Markenya, you actually said something that I thought was so powerful and very poignant. Would you mind sharing that with our listeners, if that's okay?
Oh, absolutely. I just was expressing before we started recording how today, Juneteenth was a little different than most Juneteenths that I have experienced. I think nationally, awareness has been uh, brought to the energy and the homage that's due to celebrate, this day. 155 years ago, the ancestors just realized that they were free. And so for me today was more reflecting in that energy, that ancestral strength that has brought us to this day. And although we have so far to go, we have really come a long way. And so this Juneteenth, I think, is going to go down in the books as historical. I saw so many social media posts people with T-shirts, and in the media this week, I saw different states are declaring it a holiday, a paid holiday, and so I think that even though the energy can be very loud, but I do think some very positive things are going to come out of all the social justice energy that we're seeing right now, and I'm so glad that as a nation we have recognized this day as a day to celebrate the Blacks in America.
Absolutely. And I think that is that energy is sweeping across our nation, and I think everybody is feeling that and getting swept up in that positive energy. So thank you for sharing that story. It really touched me when you shared it. So when we're looking at the EduTable as a podcast, we really are looking toward parents and educators and having conversations that are going to benefit our students. And with everything that's been happening, I know on the podcast before now, we'd been talking a lot about different things as they relate to COVID-19. And then we have all of this social unrest and really the acknowledgement of so much injustice that has been happening in our country against Black Americans. And how do we talk about that with our children and things like that? So what kinds of conversations or questions have you been fielding from your own children and from children that you work with in the school setting? Amber, would you like to share?
Yeah, definitely. I think this is a really, really important question, especially because we really need to make sure that we pay attention to what our children are experiencing, whether they're in our classrooms or in our homes. I know with my own daughters, we talk about race a lot, and we center, the Black identity within America, and we talk about, how it is and how it is to live as a Black person in America. And so I think we centered this experience recently within a historical framework, and looking at how the moments of trauma and unrest and injustice that are happening right now are just essentially like strings of pearls that have been happening throughout time, throughout America's history. So, the questions that we have that have come up in our home from my kids are more questions of like, how do we move forward? How do we help? Where are our allies? Where do we find the people that want to jump in the trenches with us to improve this situation? Where can we find the time and space to like meditate, and so that our actions are guided in a positive direction so that we can create real long lasting change? So those are the kinds of questions that I've been fielding in my home.
And those can be questions that have so many layers, and then the discussions around those, I'm sure, have been really rich. Does anybody else have any other questions that they have been fielding from either their own children or nieces or nephews or kids at school? Markenya?
I don't have children in my household, but my nephews, we chat a lot through text, and I remember the weekend of the major protest and looting and riots and all of that, and we started, the conversation, and I did ask them, how do they feel, and I remember the 14 and 15-year-old both saying, that they don't know what to feel, and so I think that is a moment that our children is experiencing, and it's a big question, but it's a simple question, and it's why. And the analogy that comes to mind often when I hear children ask why is, I don't know if you all ever saw the episode of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air when Will Smith's dad came into the picture. This is one episode. He just appeared on the scene, and he was, fell in love with his dad, and he was ready to go on the road with him. And he never showed up. And at the end of that episode, he fell into James Avery's arms and said, "Why don't he love me, man?" And he just broke out in tears. And the show kind of went off with that moment of passion. And so I think that's sort of how our kids are feeling, like, why don't society like us, and they can't just they can't put their head around, why am I treated different because of, the color of my skin? And so I think that is the biggest question that I'm hearing, among the youth. And we've heard it before, but I think now it's hard for adults to answer that question.
I think you've hit the nail right on the head. They're very difficult questions to answer, and there's so many layers of complexity. When we were finishing up school a couple weeks ago, I think it was June 4th or June 5th, we were collecting materials. So we were doing distance learning. So we had, a touchless drive-through and all of that. But one of our families, they stopped and they kind of hopped out of the car, and we spoke, 6 feet apart, but trying to just kind of wrap our minds around what was happening in the world, because there was a lot of scary things that kids were seeing on TV and hearing on the news. And this student, he was finishing up second grade, going into third grade. And in my little tiny town, we were having a march for Black Lives Matter. And this young student, looked at me and said, "Do you want to come?" And his mom asked me, "Do you want to come?" And absolutely, yes, I will be there. And when I was talking with mom, out of earshot of her son, she said, "He's biracial. I'm Black, and his father is white, and his father is a police officer." And my son is so conflicted and confused because it is, he's seeing conflicting messages on TV, and he asked me, do I need to be afraid, Mom? And that was a really awful moment for her, at her son asking her, should I be afraid? And so I think a lot of these questions will come up, and they are really difficult. Basil, what would you like to add?
Yeah, so I'm at the high school level. So sometimes the questions, not saying that it doesn't happen at the elementary level, but sometimes the questions that high school students ask are they're on a deeper level.
Absolutely.
And so as I spoke to before, I have some school sons at my school, and one of the days I was working with one of my school sons, and he kind of looked at me and said, "Mr. Marin, I want to learn how to act white like you." And I said, "Act white? What is that? What is that supposed to mean?" He says, "Oh, I see how you deal with people. You go up front, you deal with the parents, and they respect you, and so like you act white." And I told him, "Son, that's called code switching, and I'm being professional." I said, and so I think and I had to explain to him what that really meant, and that you live in two different worlds, and you're gonna have to kind of double dutch. and what that means. But I think as educators, we do our kids a disservice when we're not honest with them and we sugarcoat stuff. To
Mm-hmm.
me, it's like watching a Lifetime movie where you feel the emotions and you feel everything that's going on. But then we tell our kids, as you just spoke about in your story, the kid asks, do I need to be scared? Do I need to be worried? And, I feel like before this happened, we would just tell a child, no, that would never happen to you, baby. You're okay. But we
Right.
have to be real with our kids. Like, no, that could happen to you. You could have been George Floyd. Like, you have to be real. And so we have to teach our kids, like, not only about the bias and diversity and how you're going to you're living in a world where there's two different justice systems, but how do you bridge the gap? How do you start the conversation with your teachers and with your colleagues about, how do we have a better world? Because I tell kids, you are the next generation. You could be the next
Mm-hmm.
president. You could be the next mayor of Atlanta. Like, we have to train you right and get you right. So that way our, people after us will have a better life. As Dr. Marquenya said, we're standing on our ancestors right now. And so we're making sure that, kids at this time have what they need. And it's hard work. And I'll tell educators, listen to this podcast, if you're looking for a 5-step easy plan, you're not going to find it here because it's
Mm-hmm.
hard work and this work is difficult, but it's worth it in the end.
Absolutely. And for some of our listeners who might not be familiar with the term, could you explain what a school son is?
Absolutely. So these are young men that I've selected that do not fit the traditional mold of school. And by that, I will go in further and say that these students have had disciplinary issues in middle school. Their grades have slipped, and the literature speaks to, for high school students, ninth grade is so pivotal, especially for marginalized young men, that when they come
Mm-hmm.
into the school system, kids are tracked. They're tracked. And so giving them the right tools and supports to be successful. So I go further. A lot of schools have, men of excellence and these different mentoring programs, which are great. But I go a step further and give them the ownership and label of, you're my school son. So if I get a call from a teacher, not only are you representing yourself, you're representing me. And so it takes it a step further, and kids want to feel cared. They want to feel loved. They want to feel like they belong to something.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for explaining that. And I think that, taking that extra step has to be so, so powerful for those young men. And Nicole, you had something that you wanted to add?
I did. I know that one of the reasons why, unfortunately, very unfortunately, what has happened recently with George Floyd is not a new thing. But we didn't used to have smartphones, so we didn't used to watch it. It didn't used to go viral. It was something that the people that were there would have witnessed. But, in some way, we've all witnessed it now. And I think that that's also changed how we need to approach children, because children are seeing these videos as well. So even though before, like in my generation, I might have only been witness to what was in front of me, children are now seeing things that, we're creating an awareness for them that they didn't have before. So in some sense, innocence is lost, but at the same time, they are the next generation. So it is really important how we frame these conversations with them. Do you guys feel like these conversations have been coming up sooner? And also, how can we handle that as we go into the next school year? Because, honestly, we can't kid ourselves. Kids they have smartphones from a very young age. So they're already being exposed to these realities in our world.
That's so true. And if we don't engage our students and our own children in these conversations, those conversations are happening anyway, whether they're on, TikTok or Snapchat or Reddit or, even on Roblox. I know that kids are talking about it. And I think it's important for us to be able to listen to what they're experiencing, what they're hearing, and also acknowledge, the trauma of being exposed to a lot of this, and how we can help them and guide them through it. So, Evan, did you have questions that have come up with you, and how have you dealt with it?
You know, I think these are the conversations that I've had with both my children, and specifically my son. Um, unfortunately, I've had to have those conversations a lot younger than I would have wanted to. He's 12 right now, but a lot of things that he has to understand as a young Black man, unfortunately, in navigating our society. There are things that I have to speak with him about, just for survival, and also just for him to be more self-aware and socially aware as well, because he has a diverse group of friends. He goes to school with a diverse group of friends, and that's his reality. So a lot of the things that have taken place over the last 6 to 8 weeks, are very similar to the conversations we had, when Ferguson took place, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of him, watching things on TV with me, and me sitting down and having those hard conversations with him to help him explain and understand. And I think that, that's part of the reality for a lot of us who are either have children of color, specifically African American, identified African American, Black in this country, or either work in communities and serve, students, Black students, as well as that. It's almost as if some of the childhood innocence, right, and being naive is taken away a lot earlier than it should be. Because of the reality for survival comes into play. And it's not just physical survival, but it's also mental, right? Being able to mentally and socially navigate and understand, what's going on in the world, and how to, become resilient for a lot of things, and how to address them and how to handle them. Basil was talking about, explaining code switching to, the young man. And that's something in which that, if he didn't do that for that young man, no one may have not shown that to that young man or explained that to him. And that's something that could have been detrimental, because he didn't get it. He didn't understand. And just the fact that, I've heard this, similar before, is that, the mindset of saying, acting white, right? Putting a certain race or culture or mindset on behaviors, right, is another part of the mental health traumatic piece that has happened historically, for Black people here in the United States, in terms of determining that. And that's something, we can talk about, on later on, or at another podcast. But, the mental health aspect, and the social emotional learning aspect of all of this is real, right? We have seen traumatic events, right? Either we've witnessed it firsthand, or we have viewed it on television, and it's looped through the media, and not to mention the everyday pieces that we experience as well, and historically we've experienced. So that, in terms of when we go back to school, what I want everyone to be cognizant of and be, socially aware about is that upon our return to school, whether it's virtual, whether it's in person, the reality is that, 2 months of educating others, and educating ourselves to get to a certain point to have conversations, may not put us in the place to become experts. However, what it should do over this time is be able to open up our mindset for growth, and some better awareness and understanding to move forward. So just with that, as we kind of talk about that and move towards, what is this going to look like when we turn in the fall? Because so many things have happened. I also want to make sure that we are also protecting, our staff, our African American staff members as well, because it also isn't always necessarily fair to put the weight of some of this on them along with their other day jobs, right?
Mm-hmm.
because that's a heavy burden to carry, because it's not asked for non-white counterparts to have double duty as well, right? A skill set is a skill set. A particular certification or qualification is what it is, and just by the sheer nature of one's ethnic or racial background does not necessarily make them an expert nor equipped to facilitate some of the things that I that I feel, and from what I observed, may be coming in terms of needs from districts and schools for the upcoming school.
And you bring up an excellent point. I'm, 2 or 3 months of reading doesn't make any of us experts. And I know Nicole and I would never put ourselves out there as race experts or civics experts. But I think you also make a very good point when you say it is enough time to make forward progress. And some of the things that I've been learning is, uncovering some of the things that I didn't know that I didn't know. And now having some more awareness around those things so that I can continue to do work and make further progress. And, I think that's going to be a key piece for so many of us, and everybody's in a different place in their work, but just making sure that we are making that commitment and recommitting every single day to continue forward in that work. So Basil, when you're looking at having the kids come back in the fall, what kinds of things are you anticipating, and where do you see the conversations going?
Absolutely. I think as Evan said, we know there are going to be some deficits, right? Academically, socially, students with trauma, just based on the social justice that's going on, but also with COVID, during this time. And so I think the conversations that with the students are, we were already having a conversation about growth mindset, but really, meeting students where they are. They've already had their deficits, they're behind, but we don't need to keep reminding them they're behind either. People, when you keep reminding someone they're behind, you also lose that sense of motivation or that self-efficacy that, I can do this. And so it's also reminding teachers that, hey, we know our students are behind. We'll have our, beginning of the year professional development, but how can you get your students to where they need to be? But also having grace. And so I think for me, a big thing we spoke about this year at our school was having, compassion over compliance. And as educators, we get so stuck up on holding students accountable and wanting to always be punitive, but also meeting students where they are. And so even for me, this upcoming year, I'll be administrator over ESOL. And that's kind of been a new development that's been new to my heart, in terms of helping students who there are a lot of language barriers. And so helping those kids to kind of understand, like, what, we know you're coming, like as Evan said, not having had really strong instruction for 2 months, but how can we get you to where you have to be? So having those conversations, and one thing I'll say is understanding that SEL doesn't have an age limit. Like a lot of times when I hear educators speaking about SEL, they're speaking about, the little kindergartners or the elementary kids. We got to have SEL for our adults too. They're coming in the door with their baggage. And I told my teachers this summer, please take a break. Take a break. People are zoomed out. People are tired. Then we add on this other element of what's been going on with the unrest in our country, internationally. People need a break, and so letting people reset fully or to the best that they can, so when they come back, we can be about this work, because we have a huge hill in front of us, but we have to understand that we all got in this work, or most of us got in this work to help kids be successful. So what we have to remember our why and why we're in this work, and know that we're built for this. So how are we going to recalibrate? How are we going to make sure we get back? There's going to be a lot of different parameters. All day I was thinking about, what does, social distancing look like, in the classroom, or look like in the hallways, and all these things we don't have the answers for. But when we are given our directives from our divisions, we have to do the best we can to uphold those. But I think with our kids, this is being real, but also having love and loving on our kids and saying, you know what, we like, and I think for kids too, they will rise to a level of expectation that you give them. One of my favorite movies is Stand and Deliver. That gentleman had the worst probably class and the perceived worst class in the building, but they did so well that they thought they cheated. So if you raise the expectation and you make sure the kids reach for the high fruit, not the low fruit, they are sponges. They're gonna grow. So let's not water down instruction and try to let's piecemeal. Let's just give them what they need. Meet them where they're at, but give them what they need and stretch our kids because they want that.
Absolutely. And it's interesting too, because I think when we're talking about, don't water down the curriculum, make sure that you're challenging each and every one of those kids, because that is what they want. That is what they need. And, with distance learning and that crisis teaching, really, which is what we're doing when we all had to suddenly stay home, I think things are going to look very different in the fall as far as distance learning, because we won't be caught behind, caught unawares. I think we have more time to prepare and be more intentional with how we are delivering instruction, how we are engaging students. And I think that all of the conversations that are happening now about making sure that we understand where each and every child is coming from and not making those judgments is going to really further uh, the potential for all of our kids. But you also brought up a really good point, I thought, about not forgetting about the adults in your building and, professional development for our educators. And also, I think even parent orientations at the beginning of the school year, or those individual conferences with parents that get nervous. I think that those conversations are going to be really, really important, because just as much as every single one of our children are in different places, I think their families and our teachers are in different places as well. And you and I earlier today were talking a little bit about fixed mindset versus growth mindset, and the whole, moving from that place of fear and feeling overwhelmed. And this is such a big problem. I don't know what to do about it. Therefore, I can't do anything about it. So I should just teach my curriculum the way it's always been done. And then moving out of that comfort zone and saying, no, it is important for us to have these conversations. It is important for me to be uncomfortable and grow and learn so that we can further that work. And I think as administrators, it's important for us to create that space and the opportunity for our teachers and our parents to have those conversations and grow and learn together. So I think it's going to be an interesting year. Now, Markenya, I know that you deal with elementary age students at your school. What kinds of things are you anticipating? What kinds of conversations are you anticipating happening this fall?
I'm anticipating, more conversations with adults, with the staff,
Mm-hmm.
being in the northwestern suburbs of Chicago, or Illinois, rather. Out here, there's a tendency um, for many adults to believe that they don't have to pay attention to that noise because it doesn't impact them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I actually the other day co-facilitated a PD session for administrators, and the conversation was around diversity, inclusion, and equity. And we talked a lot about how a lot of the research suggests that equity goes before inclusion. And I said, I strongly disagree with that, because inclusion produces equity. And so just
Mm-hmm.
really doing work and conversations with the adults in the school building around inclusive practices. Um, Probably the fourth and fifth graders may be able to verbalize, emotions and thoughts around the energy that they have witnessed. The younger children, they probably have felt it, but they can't, add words to it. But I think that the heavy lift for all of us will probably be transforming, the adults in the building, especially if you do not have a large minority population. And so just having those crucial conversations around, and I had to be very candid the other day with the administrators that were in the session. I said, if you have one student that's a minority, then that's enough to take action.
Mm-hmm.
There should be representation of that student's race throughout your building. There should be acknowledgement. One is enough, so no longer can you say, well, I don't have enough to make a subgroup. One kid matters, and so I anticipate having those conversations and trying to, one of my mentors, she would tell me, she said, the saying about, you can lead the horse to water, but you can't make them drink. But she said you can make them thirsty. You can put salt in the water. And so
I really like
always,
that.
I've always kind of, tried to take that approach with those crucial conversations. Let's put a little salt in this water. So then now you're thirsty, So
Mm-hmm,
that's what
mm-hmm.
I kind of foresee more so from just coming from the elementary world, just because of the age level of the students and them being able to verbalize the emotions.
Right, right. Wow. There's been so much that's been shared in this conversation. And I think that, there's so much more for us to talk about. And I know we've talked about doing a few more episodes down the road. But I just wanted to say, thank you so much for talking about, that first foundational piece. What are the questions? The feelings are there, but what are the questions that we should be asking ourselves? What are the questions that kids are asking us so that we can prepare and get ready so that we are doing the right things? And nobody's going to be perfect, but if we can keep trying to do that next right thing and continue to grow and learn, I think we'll be going in the right direction. So Nicole, did you want to say anything as we wrap things up?
No, just again to reiterate my appreciation for our panel and their willingness to share openly with us. I think this is a learning process, and as we as parents are and educators thinking about how we should frame these conversations with children, our children are our future. So it's very important that we're framing them appropriately and in a way that's going to make a difference as we move forward.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again to everybody on the panel. You have shared some wonderful insights with us, and we are very, very grateful to know you and learn from you. So thanks again. And thank you to our audience. Thanks for pulling up a seat and being a part of our show today. You can always reach out to us on Twitter or on Instagram at _edu_table. We would absolutely love to hear from you and continue the conversation. All right. Thank you so much and have a wonderful evening. Happy Juneteenth, everybody.